trench that links the two villages. The younger folk of the area tend to call both villages Moripo, but the older folk take pride in the name and rich history behind the little Dutch-named community. The name was derived from the Dutch word de eendracht, which means unity. Decades ago, many residents abruptly left their homes in other villages along the east coast and as far as the East Bank in search of land on which to build their houses. The older residents proudly state that they all stood diligently in unity as the government tried to evict them from the land. Time after time, they refused to move and stood strong on the land until the government eventually gave up and went through with registering the land to the residents of the area. See you next time on Betcha Didn't Know, compliments of Sigismund Consultants, Inc.
Drink Pepsi Black for max taste and no sugar. Pepsi Black time, 18 hours.
The news from Guyana, the region and the world. Compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
The news comes to you compliments of KFC. It's finger licking good. First, the highlights. House Speaker Manzoor Nadir says the opposition parliamentarians who removed the mace during yesterday's debate on the Natural Resource Fund legislation will be punished. Opposition leader Joseph Harman says that legal action will be taken to ensure that the Natural Resource Fund legislation is not deemed as having been passed by the National Assembly, but the House Speaker says it was properly passed. A 57-year-old man of Walton Hall, Essequibo Coast, was this afternoon burnt to death in his house. In the region, the opposition People's Party for Democracy, PDP, and the United Progressive Party, UPP, have teamed up to contest the Barbados January 19 general elections. And internationally, doctors in Sudan say at least 14 people were killed in protest against a coup in that African country. Details of these and more with Dennis Trabral in a moment.
Planning to watch TV or listen to the radio or just enjoy a lime? Then grab a bucket of KFC finger-licking good chicken and enjoy the exciting taste of KFC and their branches on Vicinjan Road, Mandela Avenue, Regent Street, Ink Street, Stabrook Square, Breedenhoop, Parika, Movie Town, are now at the Amazonia Mall at Providence. Now open from 9 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. You'll always be enjoying the great taste of KFC.
It's finger-licking good.
And now the news in detail. Good evening. We tell you this hour that House Speaker Manzoor Nadir says the opposition parliamentarians who removed the mace during yesterday's debate on the Natural Resource Fund legislation will be punished. The mace was removed as Finance Minister Dr. Ashley Singh was debating the Natural Resource Fund bill despite loud chanting and whistleblowing by opposition parliamentarians. At the point of the removal of the mace by a number of parliamentarians of the opposition, Dr. Singh said this.
And so we are witnessing now unprecedented vulgarity in the National Assembly of Guyana, consistent with the vulgarity of the Natural Resource Fund Act that the then APNU-AFC government
One second, Honourable Member. Hold 1 second.
The House Speaker told a news conference today that those involved will be punished, but he did not say what sanctions will be imposed.
And in every parliament, an attack on the mace is an attack on the authority of parliament. And that attack on the mace cannot go unpunished. I could not find an easier word than punished.
Mr. Nadir declines to name the parliamentarian who spearheaded the removal of the mace, only saying that the video recordings show who participated in what he termed terrorist behavior. Opposition leader Joseph Harman says that the Natural Resource Fund legislation was not passed last night. Mr. Harman is rubbishing claims by House Speaker Manzoor Nadir there are two maces for Guyana's parliament. Mr. Harmon says that there's a replica mace for use by the Guyana National Youth Parliament. Mr. Harmon insists that the Natural Resource Fund Act was not legally passed last night because the mace was not present in the House. He supports the position taken by his other opposition parliamentarians that the mace was not in place and that the government parliamentarians were not seated when the bill was put to the vote. Mr. Harmon says legal action will be taken to confirm that the Natural Resource Fund bill was not passed and the law that was passed by the David Granger-led administration is still the law in force. But House Speaker Mansour Dadir says that a replica mace was used and almost all of the government parliamentarians were seated.
So let it be pellucid that the two ingredients necessary for the lawful passage of bills, motions in the National Assembly were present, the mace was in place, and the vote was taken while the members were in their seats. The majority of members were in their seats.
House Speaker Mansour Dadir. The opposition says that a new law puts control of the fund in a board that will be handpicked by the president. On top of that, the opposition says the 22-member Parliamentary Oversight Committee has been reduced to 9. APNU, AFC, as well as 5 civil society organizations say that the formula for withdrawing monies gives the government too much power to abuse and squander Guyana's oil wealth. And Finance Minister Dr. Ashley Singh is today saying that no minister can withdraw any of the oil money without parliamentary approval. The government has a simple majority to pass any law, motion, or allocation of funds. He says the Natural Resources Fund Act states that whether the regular or emergency financing is required, the Parliament must give approval.
This minister and any other minister who will come after this minister operating under this act cannot go into the fund and draw down a single dollar for purposes of emergency financing or indeed for any other purposes unless they go to Parliament first, submit a request to the Parliament, and secure approval from the Parliament. So I want to make that crystal clear. There's no arbitrary drawdown for any purpose, emergency or otherwise. There has to be prior parliamentary scrutiny and approval.
Dr. Singh says the monies will first have to be transferred from the Natural Resource Fund to the Consolidated Fund before they can be allocated and spent. He says if the monies are misused, the Finance Minister can be punished under the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act. The opposition People's National Congress Reform and a number of civil society organizations fear that amendments to the Natural Resource Fund will create a floodgate to the money being used as a slush fund under the guise of emergency funding. The passage of a local content bill now makes it law for foreign companies investing in Guyana's oil and gas sector to employ, hire, and use mainly Guyanese services. Minister of Natural Resources Vikram Barrett says Guyanese are now assured of directly benefiting from the downstream of the oil sector on the 40 initial areas. The bill provides for a Guyanese to register their local businesses with a local content secretariat.
Will require every single Guyanese business to be registered with the local content secretariat at the ministry. So we will start maybe as soon as next week with the President's permission, ascension to the bill. We will start creating those registers as early as next week. 1, to deal with employment, and 2, to deal with goods and services. So we'll have 2 registers, 1 with names and the background of people who want to work in the oil and gas sector, and 2 with the local businesses, the companies that would like to do business with the oil and gas companies.
The law also requires foreign companies to submit a 5-year and annual plan for review by the Secretariat. The Natural Resources Minister says through the law, they're required to do business with Guyanese-owned and registered companies.
Every single business and every single Guyanese would like to have 100% here. And I would want to see that too, because from us on the government side, the reason why we presented this bill and we had it passed in the National Assembly is because we want Guyanese to benefit from the oil and gas sector. We didn't leave it at a policy level and the goodwill of companies. We have an act now compelling oil companies to do business with Guyanese company. So that is a guarantee from the government that we want Guyanese to benefit. We want Guyanese to benefit. And we want this to be 100% right through. And we want to add 40 more services to it. But then we must have the capacity to do it.
The law provides for a certain percentage of Guyanese involvement in oil companies, including equal pay for local and expatriates.
The 90% of the office space rented by oil companies, be it ExxonMobil, CNOOC, Hess, or whatever the case is, it must be owned by Guyanese. Or Guyanese must have at least 50% of the share. Accommodation, apartments, example, 90%. Waste management, 75%. Warehousing, 60%. Janitorial supply services, 90%. Food supply, 75%. Lay-down yard facility, 90%. The local insurance, as I mentioned, 100%. Local legal services, 90%. Security services, 95%. Trucking services, 100% Guyanese. And these are just a few.
The Minister of Natural Resources says the law is subject to review as Guyana increases capacity, which provides for the Minister to issue an order for the change and our inclusion. The joint services are to closely monitor all year's night events to avoid large gatherings and the spread of COVID-19. Minister of Health Dr. Frank Anthony says the government is strict on ensuring that all businesses and entertainment spots abide by the COVID-19 measures governing those businesses. The health minister says there will be increased joint services patrols to ensure compliance with the measures. The health minister urges the public to also obey the protocols, failure to which may result in increased COVID cases. Dr. Anthony says an increased number of cases after the holidays can quickly overwhelm the health system. The health minister advises against using cloth masks, which are less effective, and for the public to make the N95 mask their choice of mask to wear. The Health Ministry's official COVID data shows a significant increase in positive COVID cases following the Christmas weekend. The data shows 157 new COVID infections recorded in the last 24 hours. However, there was only one death of an unvaccinated male, which takes the toll to 1,052. The number of persons in the COVID intensive care unit remains low at 7 persons. The number of persons hospitalized saw a marginal increase, which now stands at 35 persons. The ministry says 711 persons are now home isolating, which also increased after the Christmas weekend. The health minister is warning that should persons not follow measures, the number of positive cases is likely to increase after the end-of-year activities. A 57-year-old man of Walton Hall, Essequibo Coast, was this afternoon burnt to death in his house. He has been identified as Ramdas Samdas. The Guyana Fire Service says it is currently investigating the cause of the blaze at 91 Walton Hall. Samdas lived in a one-flat wooden building with his partner, Sarojini Prasad. The house and its contents were also destroyed by the blaze. The Guyana Fire Service, meanwhile, appealed to Guyanese to equip their homes with smoke detectors and fire extinguishers and asked that they be careful when cooking or using electrical appliances. The fire service is also advising persons to unplug electrical appliances after use and do not leave them plugged in for prolonged periods. Surinamese police have handed over a Guyanese man who was wanted for murder to Guyanese police. Crime Chief Wendell Blanham says that 19-year-old Ezekiel Hawker, called Alpha, was arrested on Wednesday and promptly handed over to Guyanese police. Mr. Blanham says that Mr. Hawker has since confessed to the shooting death of Dion Charles on Christmas Eve night in All Boys Town. Mr. Hawker reportedly told the police that he shot Charles in retaliation for shooting him twice before. Investigators have also arrested the driver of a vehicle who allegedly transported the murder accused from the scene. Police say he is cooperating. Mr. Hawker, who was a shopkeeper in Forshaw Street, Queenstown, Georgetown, remains in custody as police prepare to seek legal advice. Turning to news now from the Caribbean, the Opposition People's Party for Democracy, PDP, and the United Progressive Party, UPP, have teamed up to contest the January 19 election in Barbados. In a Barbados Today news report, Bishop Joseph Atherley made the announcement at a news conference on Thursday. He said the new coalition will be called the Alliance Party for Progress. Mr. Atherley says Lynette Eastman will serve as deputy leader and the party will offer better governance. Prime Minister Mia Mottley called elections 18 months before it's constitutionally due in 2023. The Joint Trade Union Movement, JTUM, has written to Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago, Faris Al-Rawi, seeking answers on government's impending vaccination policy for public servants come mid-January. JTUM General Secretary Ozzie Warwick delivered the letter to the Attorney General on Thursday. Following a meeting with JTUM last week, Al-Rawi said that the government had no intention of withdrawing the safe zone policy and called on the group to provide recommendations. The Attorney General said then that the union provided no suggestion and refused to discuss the issue of furloughing workers should they now take the COVID-19 vaccine. According to Loop News Trinidad, in its letter, the union said statements made by the Attorney General at a press conference following the meeting with the unions were totally inconsistent with the union's understanding of the meeting. The union's letter calls for respectfully resolving issues and for the follow-up meeting date and time. In Suriname, 2 hand grenades were found taped together under a car in the yard of journalist Jason Penis this morning. Star News reports that media workers are shocked at what they describe as a sweeping attempt at intimidation. The Surinamese Journalists Association says journalists will not be intimidated. The discovery of the grenades on Penis' vehicle came hours after the Association of Journalists met last night and demanded that the investigation into the brutal attack on Penis be investigated to the bottom. Mr. Penis was several weeks ago badly beaten by bodyguards of Vice President Rory Brunswick. Mr. Brunswick had alleged that a journalist had entered his car to take a picture of him and that had amounted to a breach in security. And now we go to the BBC World Service for the latest bulletin of international news.
I'm Stuart McIntosh with the BBC News. Hello. Health workers in Sudan say at least 4 people have been killed by the security forces during protests against October's coup. A pro-opposition doctors group said they were shot dead in Khartoum's twin city of Omdurman. Emmanuel Ingunza says the leaders of the coup hadn't expected the protest to continue after offering a concession.
The military had thought that by reinstating Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok after the massive international pressure they faced and the demonstrations that followed the coup on October 25th, that things will settle down. But that has not happened, and they find themselves in a very awkward position. These demonstrations don't seem to be stopping, and they are growing by the day. And even today, despite the killing of 4 people, some of the organizers still say that they will continue until the military hands over power to a civilian government.
The leaders of Russia and the United States have started a phone call expected to be dominated by tension over Ukraine. Relations between the two countries are at a low after Moscow concentrated thousands of troops on the border with its neighbour and demanded what it calls security guarantees from the West. Mourners have been streaming through the Anglican Cathedral in Cape Town to pay their last respects to Archbishop Desmond Tutu. The anti-apartheid campaigner is lying in a modest wooden coffin in line with his wishes for a simple funeral. In Johannesburg, a memorial service has been taking place. The city's mayor, Mpo Palatse, paid tribute to the important role he'd played in the life of his country.
While he was dean, he stood right here at this very pulpit challenging the apartheid regime of the time. And without fear or favor, he continued to speak against the injustices that our people were faced with. And he prophesied, he spoke life into this nation. And of course, he did it all with the humor that he was known for.
The surge in the number of COVID cases caused by the Omicron variant is causing disruption across Europe. A British railway operator has had to suspend all of its services from one of London's busiest stations because of staff shortages. Infections have also risen dramatically in Italy. Catherine Smallwood is from the World Health Organization.
We're seeing a very, very rapid increase in the number of new COVID-19 cases. Of course, we expected that anyway because of the holiday season. But with the rapid spread of Omicron, we're seeing that very much accelerated. And that's especially in Western Europe, where we're seeing countries like the United Kingdom, France, Denmark, all seeing cases now outstripping what they've seen at any previous time during the pandemic.
This is the World News from the BBC. Bahrain has appointed an ambassador to Damascus for the first time since it downgraded its diplomatic ties early in the Syrian conflict. The move is the latest in a shift among Arab countries towards allowing Syria and its leader Bashar al-Assad back into their fold. A Japanese man suspected of starting a fire at a mental health clinic in the city of Osaka that killed 25 people 2 weeks ago has died from his injuries. Japanese media said Morio Tamanoto died in hospital before police could question him. At the time of the fire, witnesses reported seeing a man place a bag containing flammable liquid next to a heater before kicking it over, setting the clinic alight. The authorities in the main tourist resort in Bangladesh have scrapped a dedicated beach section for women and children. It follows a social media outcry over gender segregation. Bernadette Keogh reports.
The exclusive female beach area in Cox's Bazar in southeast Bangladesh was inaugurated following requests from conservative women in the Muslim-majority country, who'd reportedly expressed feeling shy and insecure in a crowded place. But the beach decision triggered an uproar on social media, with many accusing the authorities of pandering to hardline Islamists, who've recently held massive rallies demanding segregation of the sexes in workplaces and factories. One commentator described the beach segregation as Talibistan, referring to the Taliban in Afghanistan.
Paris has relaxed transit rules which had prevented British nationals living in EU countries other than France from travelling through its territory. The measure, introduced on Wednesday, was linked to the high number of COVID cases in Britain. But the authorities in Paris said they were suspending it for the holiday period, so as to allow British residents to return to their homes in the EU. That's the BBC News.
And that's the news to the moment.
Hit to stand in lines? Don't worry. KFC has got you covered with their drive-thrus, which are open now from 9 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. at Movietown, Vlissingen Road, Mandela Avenue, Reading Hoop, Parika and the Amazonia Mall. That's right, you can drive through at 6 of their 9 locations. Remember, their current opening hours are 9 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. Go on down and let your taste buds savor the spices today. KFC.
It's finger-licking good.
And now for a recap of the highlights. House Speaker Manzoor Dir says the opposition parliamentarians who removed the mace during yesterday's debate on the Natural Resource Funded legislation will be punished. Opposition leader Joseph Harman says that legal action will be taken to ensure that the Natural Resource Funded legislation is not deemed as having been passed by the National Assembly, but the House Speaker says it was properly passed. A 57-year-old man of Walton Hall, Essequibo Coast, was this afternoon burnt to death in his house. Regionally, the opposition People's Party for Democracy and the United Progressive Party have teamed up to contest the Barbados January 19 general election. Internationally, doctors in Sudan say at least 14 people were killed in protest against a coup in that African country. The news came to you with the compliments of Kentucky Fried Chicken, KFC.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/demwaves.